Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Jason Kren. He's the VP of Sales over at PactSafe. Jason, how's it going today, sir?
Oh, it's great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. We're going to be talking about looking at contract design through the lens of sales for a better customer experience, higher sales velocity, and efficiency. Before we jump into today's topic, though, I would love for you to give listeners a little bit of context on your background. It's pretty interesting as you and I were chatting a little bit offline and what you and the team at PactSafe are up to, because that's really going to inform why you're the guy talking about this today and shedding some light for sales teams on this topic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, I've spent my entire career in technology. However, it's kind of almost split evenly right down the middle. About half of it was in the consumer electronics and sort of, CPG world, where I thought about technology and how people use it in their everyday lives through gadgets and gizmos and TVs. And I loved that space. But there was this sort of point in 2009 where, Apple had emerged and the convergence space had happened. We were in this post-iPod, post-iPhone sort of digital revolution. And the CE space that I was in, a lot of the dominant brands that I worked with, like I was with Panasonic and particularly with RCA, we weren't having the same impact. And I realized, I think I want to try something new, something different. And I got into software. I joined a company called ExactTarget, a marketing software. And, we were a quote unquote tiny, in my view, little company at about 500 employees. We had just eclipsed about 100 million in revenue. And then, it took off like a rocket ship, and Salesforce purchased us just a couple of years later for $2.5 billion. And then I spent a long time at Salesforce in that world. And then, like a lot of guys my age, I hit that mid-40s and realized I want to try something new with everything I've learned. And Indianapolis has a vibrant startup culture. There's a ton of investment, great companies here. And I decided to join a company called PactSafe, where we're in this, we're on a true bleeding edge of category creation. We're trying to create something that's really new in the legal tech space. I mean, it's a brand new category where, analysts are still trying to figure out what we even call it. And to be a part of that is just incredibly exciting. And so I've been here for just wrapping up 8 months in the role.
I love it, man. Thanks for that background. Definitely, I can see how that transition happened for you and kind of the impetus for it. I spent 10 years in the office equipment technology space, and I'm putting air quotes around that for folks who can't see my video. That's the euphemism for I sell copiers regionally, sure. Right? And moving from that space to now where we work with a lot of SaaS companies, working with folks who are very innovative from their marketing approach. And so some similarities there I can appreciate at my stage in my career as well. So you talked a little bit about category creation and category design that you guys are working on there at PactSafe. And we've got an entire series dedicated to category creation here on this show. I think it's a fascinating topic. I think it's timely for a lot of marketing teams. As it relates to that, you guys have been talking about this idea of click wrap agreements. And I think that's going to be, a central theme of this conversation around contract design. So let's stop and talk about that for just a second for a little bit more context on this conversation, man.
All right. So I think it's most important. Let me start with, what does PactSafe do? We are the only comprehensive click wrap platform that's been built from the ground up to give companies the ability to manage click wrap contract acceptance at scale. Okay, so that's a real simple 5-second elevator pitch. What does it mean? So I think what I have to do is start with the most basic element, which is answering a question I'm sure some listeners have had already. What is a click wrap contract? Okay. I'll tell you what, it's very easy to understand what a click wrap is because about 10 million people accepted a click wrap yesterday when they downloaded Disney Plus. They launched their new app, and after you install it, you accept their terms of service. That is a contract. That is an agreement. You probably clicked a button, you agreed to it, you accepted that. That is a click wrap contract. For a lot of businesses, terms of service or terms and conditions acceptance is the highest volume contract they will ever execute. And so so now that we've got that, and that's just sort of how companies do business these days, what our founder realized is there is a need to have a platform that manages that for businesses. And so if you understand what a click wrap is, and click wrap acceptance is now the highest volume contract in your company's business, you have to think, okay, are we managing it appropriately? And are we protected for legal risk? And that's what PactSafe comes in to do. Because what's happened is now that companies have terms of service, terms and conditions embedded as click wraps, there's been a 626% increase in click wrap litigation since 2002. So the reality is most companies don't even know they've got a problem trying to enforce a click wrap contract agreement until they have to go to court and do it. And what happens, it's a big challenge. And so what they realize is, all right, they don't have the answers they need necessarily to prove acceptance in court. They either can't prove a version, a type of contract that's been accepted, what the contract looked like when it was accepted. They probably can't produce records at a volume that a court needs. And that's where PactSafe comes in. We can manage and help companies execute click wrap contracts at scale. Yeah. Hopefully that's a more clear explanation once we talk about what a click wrap is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Disney Plus example was a great one, right? We think of accept terms and conditions. Just, that phrase, how many times have we seen that when we've installed an app, when we've signed up for something, those sorts of things. So I think that is the perfect example to paint the picture in folks' minds. So in a B2B environment, you give a B2C example. I think of, companies with not necessarily a low, but a lower ACV, a higher volume sale in B2B. I think of a lot of SaaS companies, especially if they have, maybe a freemium or a trial to purchase model or a self-serve to a model that's higher tiered with account executives. Hey everybody, Logan here. Quick shout out to today's growth sponsor. Talkable helps e-commerce companies grow through targeted referral programs that leverage insights from your customers' behavior. Join others who've hit their sales goals and seen a 10x ROI on their referral programs. Talkable lets you segment your offers and personalize your messaging to different audiences, like new versus repeat customers or by geolocation. Talkable also easily integrates with the rest of your tech stack, having a low impact on site speed and navigation, creating a seamless user experience while helping you drive more sales. Learn more at growth.talkable.com. All right, let's get back to the show. So let's talk about that a little bit. I want to talk through, contract design from the angle of sales, how we talk about it and how to facilitate a better customer experience and higher velocity for sales. So I think a lot of folks, whether it's a click wrap agreement or any sort of contract design, those terms conjure up, that's something for legal, right? And so talk to us a little bit about the importance of this topic for sales as an entire function.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good place. That's a good jumping off point. So you're absolutely right when you hit on it. You talked about, okay, everybody can relate to accepting terms of service through Disney. And that's a high volume contract. They executed 10 million plus of them yesterday. So you as a salesperson, think about how easy that was for you if you downloaded Disney Plus yesterday. Wouldn't it be great as a salesperson that you could make signing a contract for your deal that you just closed for $15,000 just as easy, just as simple for your customers? And that's the whole idea behind ClickWrap. So you hit the nail on the head. The kind of contracts that companies need to think about, and to think about moving away from a cumbersome PDF, e-signature based acceptance to a seamless single click wrap acceptance, are things like, smaller, like you just hit it, smaller high velocity sales contracts, small, renewals and upsells where there's no negotiation of the terms, SMB deals, change order forms that are quite simple where it's, non-negotiated, mobile app sign up, self-service registrations, mutual NDAs, beta agreements. There's a whole host of contracts that you as a salesperson probably have folks execute all the time. But the idea is, let's think about contract acceptance and let's think about contract design. How do we take all of those things that don't need to be slow and speed them up? And so, if you think about contract design, there's really 4 big elements that we're talking about. Number one, there's a part of this, you're right, legal's going to own it. There's nothing you can do about it. They're going to write the contracts, okay? The language. And the legal language is important. What I would encourage anyone who's in the legal department to do is think about, how do I design the legal language to be as simple and easy as possible? How do I write contracts from a contract language design standpoint that are going to encourage quick acceptance, less negotiation, and try to think about how to make it as sales friendly and as sales acceptance as possible. So that's kind of step number one. But from there on out, it's really about, how do you talk about contracts? How do you as a salesperson position and talk about a contract? That's one element of contract design. The other way is, what we want to get sales operations and sales leaders thinking about is, how do my customers interact with that contract? So we want to make that easier. And then for the business standpoint, we want to make contracts easier to accept. That's where ClickWrap comes in. And then once it's all accepted, can it be stored easy and reproduced? Those are kind of the 4 elements we talk about contract design. So I think the most important thing you control as a salesperson is, how do you talk about contracts? Okay. Language is an incredibly important aspect of this. It's all about your mindset. Think about your days as a salesperson, Logan. I bet you often said, hey, let me put everything together. I'm going to send you a contract. And then once you sign it, we'll get started. You position the end of the sale. You position it as this multi-step process. That's not easy. That's not frictionless. Nobody wins there. The idea is, think about saying something more like this. I'm going to send you a link to create your account. Once you're done, you accept the contract and we're off and running. It's over. It's simple. Or, hey, everything we've negotiated and talked about, we've got it in this contract. I'm going to send it to you in an email. All you have to do is click the link. We're good to go. So if you can move things up faster, we don't have to deal with PDFs. You don't have to embed something into a form. You don't have to embed it into your email. The consumer doesn't have to download a piece of software in order to execute the contract. When you talk about contracts that way and you place that sort of acceptance mindset out there, it's amazing how much velocity you can get in your sales process. And in a high volume environment, if you can shave 48 hours off of the end of the life cycle, from the time you get to contracting to the time it's executed, if you can literally make the contract so easy to execute that the salesperson's on the phone, the email goes out, they click the acceptance link, and you're done. That's you're talking about some amazing results that sales leaders should really be able to get behind.
Yeah, I love that point. I'm not very good at math on the fly, but saving 48 hours and increasing that deal velocity consistently, depending on your average volume of deals, your ACV, all of those things, the impact is going to be tremendous. That's for sure. And the language you talked about is just very recognizable from my own talk track in a dozen years of selling, and the typical language that I hear. But I like what you said there, is almost consumerizing it, even though it's in a B2B environment. Instead of, I'm going to send you an agreement to sign and send back, and then I'm going to give you next steps. Here's a link to sign up for your account. It's almost like, okay, that's very easy, right? I think of in my own consumer life, I go to sign up for something, and oh, by the way, there's a button there that says log in with Google. Great. I don't even have to start a new account, right? I just pick which option for logging in. And so playing off of that experience and what the person is going to visualize in their mind of the ease of that next step in the process is going to speed things along and reduce some friction from the process.
Yeah, so you've hit on two really important things here. The first one goes back to what we've talked about, sort of contract design. So it's how you talk about and position the contracting experience. And it's how a consumer, whether it's B2B or B2C, interacts with the contract. So think about this. You send out a 75-page PDF. That's a lousy way to interact with the contract. You just had a great consumer experience. You're at the point where you're ready to execute and get started, and somebody dumps an enormous PDF that you have to scroll through and look at. And then, oh, by the way, I've got to go figure out what piece of software I need to download on my phone so I can click these little boxes that I can barely see and put a squiggly line in there. Whereas with a click wrap, the contract's all embedded. You send over the link, they see it, and then all they have to do is accept. That's it. The great thing is case law has caught up with, technology in the sense that a squiggly line e-signature or a one-click acceptance is just as enforceable in the eyes of the law and the courts, exactly the same. So don't get caught up on this idea. Well, wait a minute. If I don't execute with the digital signature, it's not going to be valid. I could get sued. My customers could go away. Nope. Click wrap. It's the same thing as far as the courts are concerned. So that's really important. So it's about how you talk about it, how you interact with it. And why I think how you interact with it is so important is because the reality is this. I mean, you know this because you literally just described it. A frictionless sort of customer experience, that is the expectation today. That's not just sort of an added benefit. Oh, hey, I'm going to try to create this and make it better so my business will benefit. No, it's an expectation. I mean, you don't talk about driving to a concert anymore. You say, hey, we're going to Uber there. It's not, I'm going to go order some carryout. It's, I'm going to DoorDash dinner. It's the frictionless idea is so embedded in sort of who we are now that it's become a verb. And so what's pretty fascinating is 80% of companies, when, it was just a recent article that was in Forbes, 80% of companies believe they deliver like super customer experiences, and only about 8% of customers actually agree. And so think about that. You think you're doing this great job as a company in contracts. You think you've done a great job, delivering that to your customer. Probably 8% of them actually agree with you. So at the end of the day, if you fail to provide a superior customer experience, that's going to impact your brand. Now, you can think, well, Jason, you just talked about Uber and DoorDash, and that's really a B2C customer experience. I sell SaaS software. Who do you think's buying SaaS software today? It's the Gen Zs and millennials who are now assuming positions of economic power in companies. They expect the same frictionless experience they get in their everyday life to happen in their B2B buying experiences as well. And ClickWrap allows you to do that. It's just this really interesting sort of, convergence of our sort of non-professional B2C life coming into our B2B world. And so when you think about contract design and the acceptance part, you're creating that experience in the B2B side of things.
Yep, absolutely. Jason, I love what you're talking about here. It reminds me of something I heard between Joey Coleman, the author of Never Lose a Customer Again, and Ethan Butte, the chief evangelist over at BombBomb on the Customer Experience podcast, to go off of your comments there about what the experience is like. And that is after people sign up, that is like the trough of despair potentially for new customers. That's when we're ringing the sales gong in a B2B environment. But that is also when the customer is most at risk for that buyer's remorse. What have I done? I've just made a B2B purchase. My career could be on the line. Even if it's, $15K for the year, it's still, you're sticking your neck out a bit. And the more that you can avoid any negative experience, any friction in that process, you've got a better chance at renewal because that customer experience is better from the very get-go. So I completely agree with what you're saying there. And I think it's something we should think about related to contracts and everything from onboarding customers. So I think you've given folks in sales, customer success, and a lot of different functional roles, stuff to think about here, Jason. Now that I've picked your brain, I would love to hear a little bit of what you're putting into it before we wrap today. I love to ask some of our guests our never stop learning question. It's one of our core values here at Sweetfish. So I'd love to hear a resource either related to today's topic or something that's just got you excited or informing your sales approach these days, Jason.
Okay, yeah, I love that question. So, if you've been in sales a long time, particularly if you've been in sales leadership, you can chart the sort of phases of the sales books that everybody gets excited about. If you're an old guy like me, you remember when spin selling came out and everybody was talking about spin, and then Challenger Sale was great. And these are all great books. I'm not disparaging them. It's just, every sort of few years, there's a new sales book that comes out that sort of redefines how you go to market as a sales team. And when you've been around long enough and you've read them all, you find just sort of these common themes that are repackaged and executed a different way. A book that I found, I think, was just truly like, wow, this was a mind shift book for me, was The Transparency Sale by Todd Caponi. I mean, he advocates a whole radically different way to sell, which is leading with your flaws. And, leading with this ultimate transparency of, hey, he calls it, being flawsome, which is these are the things we do well, these are the things we don't do well, and having this ultimate transparency in the sales process that completely disrupts all of the brain patterns that buyers have to be predisposed to be negative. It's truly an authentic way to sell. I can't rave enough about it. I've recommended it to everybody. Go follow him on Twitter. Read his blog, The Transparency Sale by Todd Caponi. It's fantastic.
I love that one, man. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Todd and having him on our counterpart show, the B2B Sales Show. I was so pumped to have him on there talking about some of the things from the book, because I'm with you. I've recommended that to so many people. I've implemented so many things from that book in presentation, in negotiation, just full of some great stories, some great lessons. And as you said, a mind shift when it comes to sales, not just kind of these good reminders. So great resource there for folks, Jason. I love that you mentioned that. So as we wrap today, Jason, anybody who's listening to this that would like to learn more about PactSafe or just reach out to you or stay connected, what's the best way for them to do that, man?
LinkedIn. Last time I checked, I'm the only Jason Kren on LinkedIn. So I am easy to find there, or at Jason Kren.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for the conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.